I want to welcome everybody to this live webcast, and to everybody who's going to be watching the recording. I want to really thank Rabbi David Cohen. Rabbi David Cohen is the administrative RC here at the CRC, the rabbinic coordinator. He is the go-to authority that we look to in the office for guidance, for the research, for the insight, for the knowledge in terms of what is going on in the Kashrus realm, and giving us guidance in terms of how we should proceed. And not only do we look to him, but people in other Kashrus agencies and consumers around the country and around the world are in touch with him and rely on his research and his word, especially during Pesach and during the complicated times. So he has, in addition to the knowledge, he has a lot of the practical insight and the experience of some of the complicated things that come out, some of the behind the scenes complications that the Kashrus world is grappling with. And we turn to him generally for the bottom line. As Rabbanim, as part of the CRC, we have the schus to hear a little bit behind the scenes of the considerations that are floating around and what goes into the decision making of how the CRC is creating policy, what the CRC policies are, and giving a heads up to the Rabbanim in terms of some of the issues that are percolating this season in particular around in preparation of Pesach. So thank you very much, Rabbi Cohen, for taking time out during this busy time. And again, this is a very much appreciated service to the Rabbanim. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you, Ramasovsky. I'm really here, not Ramasovsky presented as if I'm going to be sharing all kinds of information. I'm really here to answer questions. It was posted, or I was told it was going to be a question and answer. So I'm more than happy to answer questions. I know one question that came in beforehand that I'll mention. I could talk about that. And then it's open to everybody who's there if you have questions for me. Or you can call me afterwards. I bet all of you know how to find me. Okay, and the question was about medicines, and to explain what goes on with medicines and what our positions are, and when we do or don't recommend specific medicines. Medicines, for whatever reason, are one of the most common questions we get about Pesach. People have all different types of medicinal products they want to use. And there are really 4 questions that we ask for year-round and for Pesach to decide whether a person should or should not use a particular medicine. I'll mention the 4 questions that there are. Those questions are the same for year-round and for Pesach. The answers are not always the same, but the questions are the same for them. The first question is whether it is not particular order, but the first question I'm going to mention is whether the item in front of us is edible. If the item that I have in front of me is not edible, then it doesn't make a difference whether it's kosher or not kosher, or chametz or not chametz, and you can use it no matter what. And that answers the questions for most items that adults take. As you're probably familiar with the CRC's Pesach letter that comes out about medicines, which says that things are in pill form or other inedible forms doesn't make a difference what they're made of. You could take them no matter what. So the majority of things that adults are taking are covered by that and don't get included. However, liquids and chewables and powders are not covered by that. We treat them as edible. There's a question whether they're edible or not, but we treat them as if they're edible. Accordingly, the focus of questions that people have to ask us have to do with those things: liquids and powders and chewables, lozenges, and things like that. So then we have to deal with our other questions. Okay, and another one of our 4 questions that will help us resolve that is, what are the ingredients? What's inside of there? What's in this medicine or this medicinal item? I don't use the word medicine. Medicinal item that might not be kosher or might not be or might be Pesach sensitive. So for that, that's really where the Kashrus people have an extra knowledge or extra say in what's going on over here, being as we have a familiarity with how food is made and how a lot of these ingredients are made, which ones of them are or not chametz, or which ones are kosher or not kosher. So for example, most people wouldn't think sorbitol is a kind of sugar or kind of sweetener, wouldn't think that that's chametz, but in fact, it could well be chametz. So with ingredients and kosher and non-kosher, the same thing. So the same kinds of questions are Miralax. There's a lax called Miralax, so it goes by a lot of generics of the same thing. It's made of polyethylene glycol, and it's made from petroleum. There's nothing to it. It's not kosher sensitive. It's not Pesach sensitive. So there, it's in an edible form. You mix it with a drink and you drink it down, but it makes no difference because the ingredients are completely innocuous from a Kashrus perspective and from a Pesach perspective. So that lots of items are permitted for those reasons. Okay? They don't have any ingredients that's sensitive to it. Okay. Our next question is, assuming that it's an edible form and the ingredients are sensitive, again, for year-round or for Pesach, the ingredients are sensitive. Now we have a question is, well, how sick is the person in front of us? Depending on how sick the person is, if the person will be a chodesh sheyesh b'sakana or even a suffix sakana, then they can take anything. It makes no difference what they have. It makes no difference whether it's kosher or chametzik, etc. It makes no difference. So for example, we tell people any antibiotics they can take. That makes no difference because by and large, antibiotics are all taken for things that are suffix sakana. We sat with doctors who explained to us, what each thing, if we didn't take the antibiotic, what would it lead to? Not every case, but just about every case is something that is a suffix sakana. And therefore, it sort of makes no difference what's in there. It happens to be they're not terribly sensitive, but it really wouldn't make a difference. And we tell people we don't ask them for the ingredients on the antibiotic. We say it makes no difference what it is. You could take it. A step down from that is the chodesh she'ein bo sakana, which is many people who take things. There's no sakana if I don't. For most people, if they wouldn't take a laxative, it's not a sakana. But they're chodesh she'ein bo sakana. They could be totally non-functional if they don't take this medicine, this medicinal type item. And for those things, those kind of people are allowed to eat things that are only asur d'rabbanan. So year-round, that's very important because they can eat many things that are asur d'rabbanan. So lots of things that might be sensitive for everybody else are okay for these people. For Pesach, that means those people can eat kidneys. It plays a role in one other way, which is there are lots of things that you'll see on our list as listed as being, I'll explain how our list comes in a second, but you see it on our list as being possible chametz or suffix chametz. As most of those things that say possible chametz, suffix chametz, however it's written, are things that are the ikar din is the probably not chametz. We can assume that they're probably coming in America. They're probably coming from kidneys, just the way those kind of things are made. And therefore, most people would say is most people wouldn't want to eat something that's possibly chametz. Of course not. It's Pesach. Why would I want to eat something that's possibly chametz? But a person who's chodesh she'ein bo sakana, a person who's not functional, he's bedridden, or he can't sleep, or he can only sleep, or he can't get out of bed, he's not functional. That kind of a person, under a rabbi's guidance, may be told he could eat this thing that maybe ikar din is probably okay. So we write it's possible chametz, leaving it for a rabbi to make that call of how sick is the person, and maybe they should be eating something like this also. And the lowest level of a person being sick is called a mechosh. Something that's uncomfortable, or something just for general health and well-being. It's not anything so significant. And so for that person is not permitted to do any isurim. And they have to know whether the thing in fact is kosher or is not kosher. Okay? And our fourth question that we ask, we had 3 questions so far. Our last question is there a substitute? Which is to say, is even if something is mutter from the person because he's a chola, etc., he's allowed to have this thing. But if there's something else that's equally good and he could have that does the same, help him just as well, then he's not allowed to take the medicine. And so there are certain things that we would say is don't take it because the thing right next to it is something just as good that does the exact same trick to get him just as healthy, and is not. So therefore, he can't take this item because it's possibly it is or possibly asur, and therefore he shouldn't take it because there's a substitute that doesn't. No reason to take this one instead. So now, knowing those 4 questions, that's how we make decisions for all of our medicinal items for year-round and for Pesach. Then for year-round and for Pesach, we have a list. It's on our website, our over-the-counter medicine list. It's on our app. It's on SCRC. The same information. And we research different items and we put out information about them. There's now a difference of opinion of how to prepare a list like this of medicinal items. Other lists, many of the other lists that you see out in the public of items that are okay for Pesach, the way they're made in the United States, and those lists are made by talking to a company and saying to the company, the manufacturer, saying, tell us, is this item chametz or is it not chametz? Essentially, that's the question. Is this item chametz or is it not chametz? And they're relying, now the people who are answering the questions are of course not Shem Torah mitzvahs. Those are people who don't have, from the halacha, don't have nemanas, but they're relying on them because it's umanamar nashe. They trust the person as the professional to give them an honest answer to the questions. And that in itself, the umanamar nashe is a question whether it actually applies over here. But assuming, let's say that it does apply, then there's a question of the application. Does the person who answers the question really have the information to answer my question? As an example, I said to you, mentioned beforehand that sorbitol is something that's kosher sensitive. So we call up a manufacturer and say to them, tell me, is your sorbitol made out of wheat or barley? I mentioned 5 different grains. They say to me, no, we have no wheat or barley in our product. You say, no, but what about the sorbitol? You say, well, no, okay, Mr. The person who sells us the sorbitol, tell me, does it come from wheat or barley? He says, no, of course not. I'll call my manufacturer. And he calls the manufacturer and says, no, it's not made from that. It's made from glucose. Oh, okay, not made from wheat, barley. Okay, say, no, Mr. The person who makes glucose, tell me, where do you get your glucose from? He goes back to his supplier and say to his supplier, tell me, is that glucose made from wheat or barley? Now, depending on where in the world it is, it could be from chametz, or it could be from kidneys, or it could be from something totally innocuous. So there's a lot of layers here. When I say to the manufacturer of the medicine, tell me, is your sorbitol chametz? Really, I need that question to move a whole bunch of steps back to the person where the chametz potentially is. And the question is whether that's really going on, and is the question making it all the way back to where the person who really knows the answer to that question. So for those reasons, we don't feel comfortable asking those kind of questions to manufacturers and feeling confident that the answers we get back tell us the truth. So our list instead looks at it without knowing anything about the manufacturer, about the specific ingredients. We look at the ingredients, we know what's in there, and knowing of those ingredients, we say, tell me, are these ingredients sensitive? That was our second question. Are these ingredients kosher sensitive? Tell me, who takes this medicine? Is this taken by a person who would be a chayla she'ein b'sakana, she'esh b'sakana? What would be, who would be taking this kind of a medicine? And is it in an edible form or is it not edible form? Is there substitutes? All of our 4 questions that I mentioned to you, we think it through as if the person is standing in front of me and saying, I would like to take this item. Can I take this? So those are the 4 questions that have to be asked. And we say, seeing the ingredients, knowing the person who takes it, is this acceptable or is it not acceptable? And then based on that, we either recommend or don't recommend the product. Or in the case of Pesach, we might say that it's a possible chametz. Possible chametz, which is to say is, we need the rabbi to deal with the actual individual and say to him, tell me, explain to me the condition you're taking it for. Tell me how ill you are and why you need to take it. Will help us decide whether to allow it or to not allow it based on the amount of suffix that there is to this item. Okay, so that's how we answer Pesach questions. That's how our information that's out there on the public. We, in spite of, or maybe because we have so much information out there, we got lots and lots of questions about medicines up to the last minute before Pesach. And just for whatever it's worth, before answering a question, in almost every case, we're going to need to know the ingredients that are in the product that plays into answering the question. So we tell people, and we could tell it to you, you could pass it on to people. If you have a question about a medicine, the best way to get a quick answer is to send a picture of the item together with all the packaging that's in it, so we can get the information about the active and the inactive ingredients. Send it to info@crckosher.org, and someone can look at it. Whoever looks at it are the kind of people who would be able to answer that question. We'll pass it to the right person who can, and by this way, you're providing all the information that we need to hopefully be able to give you our accurate answer to that question. Okay, that's what I have to say about medicine. If anybody has any other questions, please, I see everybody's muted. So maybe you could unmute people so they can.
Yeah, everybody can unmute themselves on the lower. I think a year in, people should be used to the Zoom format by now. Rabbi Cohen, I know there was some here in Chicago. There was some talk about some soft matzahs and then some do it yourself matzah baking kits. And can you just describe, a lot of the Rabbanim were of course, understandably not in favor of this. And I think you looked into some of what the potential problems could be. Could you discuss that?
I can partially answer your question. And that is, the first step is Rabbi Reese said that the custom for Ashkenazim is to not use soft matzah and only to use the hard, crunchy matzah that we're all used to. So for Ashkenazim, that's sort of the end of the story. If you can't use soft matzah, then it doesn't make a difference. You can't use them. For Sephardim don't have that minute, and therefore Sephardim potentially could use it. But Sephardim, like with any other food, particularly sensitive one like matzah, would need to know whether the hashgacha, people who are certifying it, are doing a good job at giving hashgacha on it. I'm not going to speak publicly about another hashgacha or particular brand or product, but I will tell you that producing matzah kosher Pesach is it's a sensitive process. There's a lot of halachas that are involved in it. Like, for example, most people don't know that you can't, there's halachas about the amount of sunlight that comes into the room when you're baking matzahs. Okay? That's an example of something that you would have never dreamed is relevant to making matzahs. And there's lots of pages and pages of Shulchan Aruch of the dinim that have to be done. And it takes a lot of effort. I know from just experience in seeing matzah bakeries, we certify our own matzah bakery in Eretz Yisrael. There's a lot of effort goes into doing it right. So as with anything, you would only buy it from a reputable hashgacha. Here, that much more so, it's a particularly sensitive item to make sure it's done right. If someone wanted to make matzah at home, they would really have to know all that information also. It's not just now trusting the hashgacha. They would need all of that information and, I guess, a certain amount of experience or even to be able to do it. In theory, you can do it, but it's not an easy thing. Not an easy thing to do, and you really need to be well prepared in order to do that. So I don't recommend people do it at home unless they really know what they're talking about. And hashgacha-wise, it's just the simple answer is it has to be a good hashgacha. But the more complicated answer is that this is something you have to be. We want to extra careful to make sure the hashgacha knows what they're doing because it's a complicated hashgacha.
I sent you in the chat also somebody asking about CBD, hemp, marijuana on Pesach and the status of that. Is it kidneys?
I have to check. I don't remember. I'm gonna check now. The answer to the question is that I'm not going to answer until I answer. Hold on, let me check for a second. Before I answer, I just let you tell you what's going on right now while I'm talking to you. Ask CRC. I'm looking. I typed in the Pesach section, look, the word hemp, and it says there that we treat hemp. I got back 2 answers for hemp, and they said that hemp is considered kidneys. So that's an easy answer to the question, which is that hemp is kidneys. The question of which things are kidneys is quite an interesting and intricate question as to what we treat as kidneys. If you want, Rabbi Mustafsky, I can find you the link for a sharing about it. People can listen to that if they want to hear more details about it. It's quite interesting. So it's kidneys, so then we're out of business for that. Even if it weren't to be kidneys, the extraction, it's an extraction. It's something is removed from the actual plant, and that extraction can be done with solvents that are sensitive to Pesach. So it would need hashgacha, even aside from the fact that it's kidneys, it would need hashgacha because of the process of making it.
And for kidneys, any product derived from it would be problematic?
Correct. There were and are those who think that things that like the oils that come from kidneys are not considered kidneys. The Rama says that it is. The Rama himself, he's talking about an example of a person who has a lamp in their table. You're allowed to have hana from kidneys. You're just not allowed to eat it. And so the Rama says, talking about a person who has a lamp that uses oil made of kidneys. So you're allowed to use oil made of kidneys to get light from it. That's okay. It's much to have hana from it. Just not to eat it. The Rama talks about what about the fact that it might drip onto your food on the table. Okay, but the assumption was, of course, that if it would drip and get into your food, then it would be an issue because this thing is kidneys. Well, that's only oil of kidneys, and the Rama is pretty straightforward. Then, of course, that's included in this. And so it would be CBD if it came from there. If hemp is kidneys, then CBD is as well.
Okay, two other quick questions that I was recently asked. One, do you have any knowledge of any antacids that can be used on Pesach?
And what was that? What did you say?
Antacids that can be used on Pesach?
Antacid. Um, I don't. I mean, I know there's Adwe antacid if that appeals to you. I don't remember offhand. If I can look on SCRC just like you can. That's what I would do. I just type in antacid and see what comes up under Pesach. Um, there are others who recommend Tums. Not this year, but in previous years, we spoke to the Rav Machshir of Tums. And there's two potential issues with Tums. One is the simple one, which is that it's kidneys. That's a simple issue. So it would only be permitted to specific people who are cholim enough that they're allowed to eat kidneys. That's the most obvious issue. But assuming we got past that and the person was a cholim was allowed to eat kidneys, it's kidneys mixed with chalk, mixed with flavor. So we said to the Rav Mashra, can you tell us? And he says, well, I can't tell. I have no idea whether the flavor has chametz in it. We went a step further and we were in touch with the people who give hashgacha to the flavor. That's not the person who gives hashgacha to the tam, it's the person who gives hashgacha to the flavor. They also said they could not determine whether it was not chametz. So we didn't feel we could possibly recommend it. Others who were recommending it are ignoring the possibility of the flavor is chametz. That's a halachic issue, whether we should or should not ignore the flavor. It's a little complicated. We don't believe that we should ignore the flavor, and therefore we didn't recommend it. Again, the Rav Machshir himself said it has the flavor. He didn't tell us the flavor. However, we roundaboutly were able to be directed to the people who certify the flavor, and they said they couldn't make that determination. So, that was the end of it for us, for Tums.
The concern of the flavor is kidneys or
It's
more?
likely that it's kidneys, but it could also be chametz. Again, we said, don't tell us if it's kidneys. We know it's kidneys. The whole thing is it's made of cornstarch. We know it's kidneys. We want to know if it's chametz. And they said, tell us that it's chametz free. That was our request. And they looked into it and they said, no, we can't say that it's chametz free. They weren't able to make that determination. So they give hashgacha to it. They know what's going on in there. So I sort of can't be smarter than they are. The people who recommend it are not trying to be smart. They're just saying we're ignoring the possibility that the flavor is chametz. They're not. They have a reason why they want to ignore it. We weren't comfortable with that. But they're not because they know about the flavor. Again, we got deeper into the flavor than we think they did.
Another question that people ask just about this year, if there's any updates about steamers for Hagala. Do you know of any steamers?
So there are two conditions of kashering, and that as a result of those two conditions, sort of usually makes it you can't kasher with a steamer. One of those conditions is that you need to kasher with a liquid. Ramosha says we don't kasher things with a vapor, with steam. We can only kasher with steam if it turns into a liquid. But in the end of the day, we need to have a liquid in a sense, on our counter. That's usually what people want to use it for. We need to have a liquid. That's one condition. And the second condition is that we can only kasher with water that's approximately at a roischim temperature, or boiling temperature. It's not boiling because it's poured out of a kli rishon, but give or take, it's at a boiling temperature. And what happens is the steamers tend to do one or the other. Either they're so hot that there's no liquid on the counter, so they're very hot, but they miss the first condition of being a liquid. Or the other ones give out liquid, it's water, but the water is not at a boiling temperature. It's not anywhere near the boiling temperature that we need. And therefore, most steamers that people try fail for one of those two. It's either too hot, it's so hot that it's steam, or it's not so hot and it's not hot enough. So there are steamers that are capable of kashering. We seriously last year bought a machine that someone had told us about. It was cost about $1,000, and that machine was fine. It did a good job. If you watch, we have a video on our website about kashering steamers, and in there you can watch me kashering my counters with this CRC steamer that we bought, and it worked fine. It was hot and it was water, and it did a good job. It was neat and safe and wonderful. But most steamers that most people want to buy are like in like the $50, $75 range, and they don't do it. It's for one of these two reasons that they fail. There are people who have jerry rig different kinds of devices, or found special ones that are able to do it. There's someone in town, there's a lot of Polsky, who does it. We watched him kasher, and his was fine. He was doing it fine. It was water and it was hot. And if people call us, we tell them they should use him because they could use him because he does a fine job. But for your average person who just wants to just buy one on Amazon and go to Target, those steamers tend to not do the trick.
Does anybody else have any questions for Rabbi Cohen? You have to unmute yourself if you do. 1 second. And if anybody else has any questions, now is the good time to ask. If you have any questions for Rabbi Cohen.
While everybody's thinking, I'll just mention one thing. I mentioned before about medicines. The same thing applies to many other items like pet foods and other foods and all kinds of cosmetics, etc. The first stop we recommend people is look at Ask CRC. If they don't find it there, then take pictures, including the ingredients, and send it in to us so someone can look at it. And that's what helps you get an answer faster and helps us give that answer.
A lot of the confusion that I hear from people is when they figure they can pick up any guide, whether it's the OU guide, the Starcade guide, the CRC guide, and see if something's okay. And then they realize that they bought something based on one guide, which doesn't seem to coincide with another guide.
It happens. That happens. We hear more of, not yet, but in like a week of, I already cooked for Pesach and I realized that this item wasn't kosher for Pesach. That's not yet. That's going to be like in a week. People will start with that.
So one of the things that somebody asked me the other day is the CRC policy of toothpastes and how that differs from other agencies.
I don't know if it differs from other agencies, but the CRC policy is that there's a question whether toothpaste and mouthwash and lipstick, this is very similar, whether they are or not considered edible. There's different ways of judging edible. One way of looking at edible is that it's something that if you had a choice, you would eat. So like, for example, if I put out Pepsi and Sprite and tooth and mouthwash, which one would you choose? So if that's the criteria, would you choose to eat it? Nobody in their right mind would choose Listerine. Okay, everybody would pick the Pepsi or the Sprite. Nobody would choose Listerine. So that view says that mouthwash is not edible. The other way says is edible just means is could you get it down? So could you swallow Listerine? If I gave it to you, yeah, you could swallow Listerine. It's fine. If I gave you toilet bowl cleaner, you couldn't possibly get it down. If I gave you some dirt, you couldn't possibly get it down. If you view edible, if that's how you view edible, then mouthwash and toothpaste and lipstick are edible because yeah, if you need to, you could get it down. You wouldn't choose to, but if you need to, it's okay. You could have it. I mean, we all know that little kids eat toothpaste, and so you could, if you wanted to, you could get it down. So for year round, the CRC takes the position that those things are not considered edible, and you can use any one you want to. On our website, we list toothpaste and mouthwashes that don't have shilosim or have almost no shilosim for those people who want to be makbid. But overall, if you call up the CRC and say, hi, can I use this and this toothpaste? We say all toothpaste is fine. We don't consider it edible. For Pesach, people makbid, the CRC takes the position that those things are not considered, are yes considered edible, and therefore you should only use them if they're free of chametz. So that of course sends people scrambling to try to find items that they need, they want, toothpaste, mouthwash, and lipstick. So for toothpaste and mouthwash, there aren't many great choices other than the ones that have hashgacha to them. So they're the ones that I made special for Pesach. I don't know if we have any others on our list that are acceptable other than those. I might be wrong. Other than ones that have hashgacha. For lipstick, at first, for years ago, we used to tell people the same thing. You need hashgacha, or you need one that's okay for Pesach, which basically meant there's nothing. There was nothing to do. There's no lipstick for Pesach. Then we started looking more carefully, and for the past number of years, we'll look at dozens of lipsticks. Look at the ingredients. We get a list of the ingredients, and then almost all of them were okay. Almost none of them had chametz. Most of them had treif. By and large, they were made of animal fat. So people were okay smearing animal fat on their lips, but not chametz. But we looked into them, and every year we recommend dozens of these ones okay, these ones are not okay, or these ones are a suffix if they're okay or not. Under the assumption that maybe that we're considering them edible, but they there were no ingredients in that was sensitive for chametz wise, so we were good recommending them. That's been going on for a number of years, including this year. So you go to XRC and you type in, I don't know if Maybelline is on this year. Type in Maybelline and the name of your variety, and voila, it tells you if it's good or if it's not good. That only helped, but for the dozens that we looked at, we only could see that many choices. And how many can we look at it? There's lots and lots of varieties of lipstick. So then we created last year, it's there again this year, a lipstick checker, which is you can go to lipstick checker and type in the ingredients yourself that are in your lipstick. And it helps you. You only have to type in a few letters and it shows you what you really meant to say. And then press submit or something, and it tells you, it'll answer for you whether the lipstick is okay or not. Which is to say we took all that information we had from years of checking lipsticks, and we have thousands of lipstick ingredients we've looked at. The computer knows those ingredients, and you tell the ingredients that are in your lipstick, you press the button, and it tells you could use a lipstick or you can't use a lipstick. Sometimes, of course, there are ones we didn't get. Just today, someone wrote in, I used your lipstick checker, and it had this ingredient that wasn't on your list. So then we answer the person that question, but basically they had all the information themselves. They did most of the work themselves, and you can do it yourself also. You could take your lipstick to take. I'm thinking about here, we have lipstick you can see on the screen, at least the names I recognize. But go home and take lipstick in your house, look up the ingredients, and type them in yourself, and you'll see the answer whether you could use them or not.
Thank you. Okay, just checking again if anybody has any questions for Rabbi Cohen. If nobody has any other questions, we'll thank Rabbi Cohen and let him get back to all of his work. I think it's a busy time of year, but Rabbi Cohen's generally very busy. And I'm sure there'll be many more questions in the next week and a half before Pesach. So thank you, Rabbi Cohen, for everything.
You're welcome. I'll go down to everybody.
We got to
Thank you.